Happy Friday. Happy government shutdown day number 3. Exciting times. Markets are hitting all-time highs. They just seem to be looking through the whole shutdown issue. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they know something I don't know. So, last time I hinted I was going to talk about a tariff. And this is just so exciting. I know you've been waiting forever. We're going to talk about soybeans today because why not? It's exciting. There are a lot of cool numbers around it, and there's something to be learned about what's going on with soybean exports in the United States and what happened because of some tariffs that are going on. I think this is a good example of one of many that shows maybe unintended consequences of the tariffs that were put in place by this administration. So let's dig in because it's fun. You'll learn a lot of stuff, I hope. And I think it's just cool to understand things and dig in deeper and understand some numbers. So why did I choose soybeans? First of all, it's one of the top crops in the United States along with corn and wheat, right? And we produce, as a country, a lot more of these things than we consume domestically. So we export the extra, or the delta, as I call it. And soybeans is a ginormous market for the U.S. in terms of an agricultural export. It's somewhere between, let's just call it roughly $30 billion a year in value to the U.S. farmers in terms of an export. Big. It's huge. Now, next layer. Who's the number one buyer, country-wise, of U.S. soybean exports? Dun, 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 dun. China. Yep. They buy about 60% of our exports of soybeans every year. Interesting. And I know you know where I'm headed with this. Tariffs. How have the tariffs impacted this? So, rewind, beginning of the year, Trump administration put tariffs almost unilaterally on a lot of countries, right? And most of these tariffs were very general in nature. So, at the time, it wasn't as specific as textiles, farm equipment, whatever. It was more of like, okay, here's a 10% tariff on everything that comes out of China, for example. And then what happened? We talked about this. There were retaliatory tariffs from these countries saying, if you're going to do that to me, I'm going to hit you even harder. And China has done that specifically on the soybean front. So, after our tariffs against them, in about April, a 44% tariff on U.S. exports for them imports of soybeans from the United States took effect. Ouch. What happened as a result of that? Well, again, $30 billion market. China absorbs about 60% of that supply, and almost overnight, zero bagels. They stopped buying soybeans or entering into any further contracts with the United States on soybeans. That's a ton, guys. That's a big, let's do the math. 30 times 0.6, $18 billion. That spigot was turned off. So where did they go and why? Well, we are the number 2 exporter of soybeans in the world. Number 1 is Brazil. Then it's us, Argentina, pretty high up there too. So they pivoted. China pivoted so quickly and went directly to Brazil and Argentina to fill that gap. Not only because they were giving the middle finger to us and saying, hey, if you're going to do that, but let's look at the numbers. Economically, it just makes a heck of a lot more sense for them to be purchasing soybeans from Brazil right now. So let's dig into the numbers because it's just kind of fun. All right. So, again, we need to calculate not only the traditional cost of producing soybeans, but now that there's a 44% tariff on our soybeans going out of the United States into China, it's a big deal. So, I'm going to put on my glasses again. I'm going to get nerdy. We're going into some numbers. Here we go. So, for soybeans, they generally quote costs on a per bushel amount, is what it is. That's just their unit of measure. Now, for Brazil, and this is pretty recent. It should have been as of in the past couple of months. 1 bushel of soybeans out of Brazil costs all in, meaning cost to produce it, any freight costs, any port handling costs, any tariffs, to deliver that bushel of soybeans from Brazil to China is $15.46 per bushel. That's the estimate. $15.46. What is it from the United States today, along with our 44% tariff? I shouldn't say, well, the tariff they put on us. It's not $15.46, folks. It's almost $23. That's over $7 more. It's over 30% more for China to purchase soybeans from the United States versus Brazil. So where do you think they're going to get their soybeans? All day long, they're going to Brazil and Argentina. They're not just going to buy here because they have before. It makes zero economic sense to do so. So, again, $15.46 from Brazil, all in delivered to China. For the U.S., all in delivered, $23 a bushel. Nope, zip, done, overnight, almost, seriously. That soybean market, 56% of it, is not getting bought. Not awesome. And add to that, right at the highest demand time. So the season for purchasing soybeans, November, April. Where are we? We're in October. So, China's gone to Brazil, gone to Argentina, entered into long-term, short-term contracts to cover all of their needs for the near term. Well, I guess from a financial and a business point of view, good for China, right? I mean, they're getting their soybeans cheaper. What's interesting is the price that Brazil is charging right now of like $15.46 all in. If we didn't have the tariffs that were on the U.S., we'd be kind of equivalent. So, remember we talked about unintended consequences at the beginning. So what are the farmers doing? What is going on? Because it has had a huge impact, not only on where the U.S. soybeans are sold, but what about that other, call it 40 to 50% of the soybeans that go to other countries? Well, Econ 101, folks, supply and demand, right? So if all of a sudden your biggest purchaser stops buying something and you have excess soybean in your fields, in storage, and it's just sitting there, what does that do to the price of the other stuff that you have? Drops, right? So not only is the U.S. farmer getting hit because over half, soybean farmers, I should say, over half of their supply is no longer being bought, the other half-ish, the price is just plummeting. What else is happening to the U.S. farmer? Well, just like us, if we buy a home or a car, usually you get a loan for that, right? You pay it back over time. Well, lenders are now raising the red flag and saying, uh-oh, some farmers aren't making their payments. They're not getting the revenue when they used to get in from selling their soybeans. They're not servicing their loans. They're not paying. So one thing to look at, we can't do it yet because it hasn't fully hit, would be the delinquency rate on these loans. So it's having a snowball effect. So what do we do? Do we help out farmers? What do we do? Well, in the past, yeah, the government has put subsidies in place, different acts of Congress, to basically fund that gap, get money into the hands of farmers so that they can survive. Well, Amy, can't they just rotate crops? Really? Do you think it's easy overnight switching thousands, tens of thousands of acres of soybeans into something else? The cost of that, let alone, you can't just do that. I'm not going to get into all the biological stuff of like soil composition. We could, but let's not do that. So no, they can't switch overnight. And these farmers are sitting there going, whoa, wait a second. We were told that the whole reason for tariffs coming in place was so that we would be more competitive, right? That as a country, we would become more competitive. It's done the opposite. So, back of the envelope numbers, right? $30 billion market, let's just say half of it is purchased by China. $15 billion. In a very, very short period of time, the U.S. soybean farmer and all the constituencies in between are no longer getting that $15 billion. Well, can you pivot and maybe sell that to anyone else? Maybe a little, but no other country or combination of countries is going to be able to make up that exact slice of pie of soybeans that China was responsible for purchasing from the United States. So it's chaos. It is chaos. And U.S. farmers are up in arms, looking at bankruptcy. And again, was this the intended consequence of the administration in terms of putting on tariffs in general? I'd beg probably not. And it's not just soybeans. You can look at other industries as well, and you say, okay, so what would be interesting, and I'm not able to get these numbers, I tried, but I'm not able to, is if you look at the net positive impact to the United States from tariffs, from a dollar value. So think about like that 10% tariff, blanket tariff on all goods imported from China. And I think there was a 90-day agreement, so it goes through November at some point. But what are we getting from that? And again, China's not paying that, right? The U.S. importers are paying that at the border. But what is the economic benefit of that to our country versus the economic loss and damage, I will call it, being caused by that reciprocal tariff, that 44% tariff that China put on U.S. soy? Add to that potential bailout dollars that the government will put in place to make up the difference for farmers so they don't go under. Again, I don't know the math, and I'm not sure a lot of folks have even been presented that math or even thought through that whole thing. But that's the kind of analysis that you need to do, folks, on the various tariffs and how they implicate not only monetarily our country, but how is it affecting the average person? What about the farmers in Iowa and Nebraska that have their whole livelihood staked on producing soybeans? And all of a sudden, boom, overnight, half of their demand is just gone. That's a frightening prospect to wake up to, folks. So, again, dig deeper, do the numbers, figure out the real story. And this is just one of many, 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 many that we can dig into. But I'm going to leave you with that. Have a wonderful Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy it. Enjoy fall if you have that weather. We're finally getting it here, thank God. But thank you. And thanks for all the positive feedback. And take care. Bye, guys.